Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're listening to us. This is the Araucast, episode 11, and I'm Beppe once again, joined by the full team, as almost always. Hello, Emerald, Hermit, how are you guys doing?
Hello, guys. I'm doing very well. Today we're gonna record this a little earlier, so we're probably gonna be a little more energetic. I'm feeling good. And I think this is gonna be a great episode.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hello guys. And well, I'm feeling a bit excited today about this episode in particular because I know it's a kind of a passion project of one of our co-hosts. So hopefully things get a little, as Emerald said, energetic or spicy or even ranty if the universe allows. Let's see what's in store for us today.
For sure. And some reminders first, like and subscribe if you like what we're doing here. If you want to wait for the end of the episode, that's fine. Also, okay, Matrix channel, if you it's still up. It's still up if you want to join our Matrix channel to have some text-based conversations. Always there. Odyssey channel as well, if you want to support us in a different platform other than YouTube. Also, follow Beppe on X if you wish. Not many tweets in English, but you can talk to me there. One more thing. In the last episode, we started using a new recording setup using Mumble and uh, geeky stuff. And I have noticed that my audio was a bit chopped at times at the end of phrases and sentences and so on. So I apologize for that. Now I have tuned the voice detection configurations a bit, so I believe it will be a little better. And also I need to work a little more in my pronunciation. I don't have the most clear voice ever, so I'll make an effort. Okay, going to our episode topic. I want to confess to our audience and to you guys, who are my co-hosts, that this topic of today is the one that I had in mind when I started this old Araucast project, the Araucanian Resistance project, actually, because it almost synthesizes all the stuff I wish to talk about. I'll probably uh, go on some long rants, and I ask you to tell me to shut up if I go too long. And this will probably we won't be able to condense all the topics I have noted here in a single episode. But I want to start the conversation and try to find a single thread that ties everything together. Our topic today is what I would call third-worldism. This is a concept that I mostly got from two guys on Twitter, which are Jared Clark and George Howe. They started using this, and I started paying attention to what they were talking about and linking that stuff to many things we see in Brazil and other Latin American countries and so on. Because they talk about third worldism from the perspective of people in America, how Americans perceive the what we could call the third world mentality. But I wish to focus here on how it can be perceived from Brazil or similar countries, right? One of the analogies I can make, and it's an analogy, will never be perfect, but it helps understanding a bit. Not sure if MGTOW is a thing nowadays, but it was pretty huge some years ago. And one common trend that I have seen in the way MGTOWs are and so on was that they have this tendency of taking defeats and portraying them as victories, right? I mean, society. They could even start from a true premise. Oh, society is like this and that. We live in this gynocentric society. Laws are always give advantage to women and so on. Therefore, I won't engage in this game, right? I won't be part of this. And they kind of celebrate this as a victory. Look, I avoided the giant-centric society and so on. But the thing is, if you just avoid the thing, if you just don't play the game, you don't win the game. You lose by not showing. So maybe you can be proud of the fact that you haven't wasted resources on all that, but it's not a victory, right? I mean, you didn't have kids and so on, so all the things you're doing will be ended in a single generation. So, but they have this tendency, right? Oh, it's fine to simply don't play the game, don't engage in that, and you win. No, you don't win. You just don't show. You're not part of the game. You mean the effect of what you're doing, you probably not remain for too long. And I mean, as I said, it's not a analogies are not never perfect. They are not proper arguments, but it makes me think of this when I look at the attitude that many third worlders have uh, that involve not recognizing the situation they're in and taking anything to celebrate as a victory, as a statement of how superior they are to this first world and all that stuff, right? And that, I mean, it has so many ramifications. But deep down, I think that's the issue. We don't want to recognize the inferior situation we're in, because I believe anyone who can who is at least a bit sincere can look at us and look at countries in Europe, the US, Japan, Australia, and so on, and see, okay, I think they have been doing something better than us for this difference to exist. But what a third worldist will do will say, oh, we only believe those things are better because of this globalist first world Eurocentric mentality that made us believe this. But actually, we're in a much better position. And instead of changing, we just need to change our mindset and start seeing how good or how much better are the things we have, right? Uh, one of the most fitting examples I can think about is the Protestant work ethic. I mean, in my opinion, regardless of your denomination and so on, there's something to be admired in Puritans, in the way they approached work and how that enables them to go from rags to riches. When you look at the US, especially, I mean, there's no clearer case of someone coming to a land which has nothing and building a civilization, building a prosperous society, and so on. And we look at this and just think, oh, this is just a lie. This is just to something made to exploit the workers and think they have to work hard more than they need and so on. But what is actually good is to live like I don't know, an Iberian and have a siesta after lunch and go back to house at, I don't know, 4 p.m. And that's what actually works. The only reason we're not prosperous is because someone is manipulating things in a way that forces us to work more, and the Puritan work ethic is just the intellectual justification for this. It's all fake. It's all fake and gay, right? That's the common trend I see. Let me ask your opinion before I go on a longer rant. What do you guys would identify as third worldism, if there's such a thing? And how would you define it? Would you see it in the same way that I see?
Well, I think you're spot on that Puritan work ethic question. I was coincidentally thinking about it today, and wouldn't I didn't have our episode in mind when I was thinking about this, and uh, it is a pretty good summary of what third world mentality is. At least to me, it is the idea that there are some countries which have gotten some sort of historical advantage, but the third world lens only allows it to see what it is in relation to us, not in relation to themselves. What I mean by that is we don't see how the Puritan work ethic made Britain or the US great. we only see the result, which is America and Britain are wealthy countries which built empires, and then the third world mentality arises to justify why they are like this and we are not. So it goes a bit into what you're saying on this attempt to try to rationalize this and say, no, we actually live better because of siesta, because we don't take work too seriously, we are more human, etc., etc. But it really hinges on that point where we don't want to, or at least the third world mentality doesn't want to explore what makes these countries great. They only want to explore some kind of power or economic relation.
One thing that I also associate with this mentality is not only the rejection of the Protestant war Catholic, but also the idea of a constantly revolutionary mentality. It's always us against them in the sense that, oh, if these um, countries or these cultures are much more developed than we are, it's because they were the ones to take from us something like uh, the primal source of our greatness or something, and then the narratives about colonialism and things like that. I don't know if you guys know the concept of visions that Thomas Sowell talks about um, in his book Conflict of Visions. I haven't read the book, but I read Intellectuals in Society, and he talks briefly about it. And I think that the fundamental thing for third worldism is this vision of constantly thinking that you constantly deserve more. You deserve a lot. And why? Because someone else took it from you. Someone else took your greatness. Someone else robbed you from your potential or something. And it's you guys made the connection with the Protestant war Catholic, and yeah, that's absolutely true because um, if they share it from this vision from the Protestant war Catholic, they would know at least that they are responsible to some degree for their own, failures or for their own mishappenings. But because they don't, they tend to be very conceited and very, demanding of others. I think that is how I would look at it.
Yeah, Hermit mentioned this idea of just looking at the effects and taking them for granted. Okay, fair enough. You can look at the U.S. or Europe of the 20th century and see, oh, look at the Monroe Doctrine and so on, how they were enforcing their will on the entirety of the American continent and so on. And starting from this position and extrapolating, retroactively extrapolating and thinking, oh, if they were able to enforce stuff during this period and get everything to go their way, they have been doing this uh, since the beginning. So that's how they become rich. But they don't consider that at the beginning the U.S. was not able to do this. They had to become strong first. It correlates a lot with colonialism, right? We look at Europe and say, oh, they're rich because they have exploited the other parts of the world. But they don't consider for a moment that in order to enforce something over the other parts of the world, they needed to be stronger already. One of the biggest topics in history, not one of the biggest, but one big topic in history, as far as I understand, is the Great Divergence, right? This process through which Europe started from an underdog at the during the early Middle Ages or the high Middle Ages, and in a matter of 2 centuries, they have surpassed the Eastern caliphates, the Muslim caliphates. They have surpassed the Orthodox realm and became this top power in the world, capable of making the investment and having the civilizational willpower, if you, if you want to say it like that, to explore the world and spread, I mean, the gospel or so on, and conquer the Indias and find a new route to Jerusalem and so on. So all this civilizational impetus it hasn't come from nowhere. You cannot invert cause and effect. You can't look at some some kind of exploitation that happened after and say, oh, it's because of that in the Middle Ages they were able to get into this prime position. You cannot do this. But we force ourselves, third worldists force themselves to think like that, right? And, I mean, when you look at Brazil, for instance, you can make the argument that in a certain point of history, it was in a much better position to be the hegemonic power in the American continent than the US. But something has been done wrong, or the 13 colonies have done something better than us, and the position has been inverted. But we cannot admit this because that means you have to take responsibility, right? Third worldism, in a certain sense, is this constant avoidance of responsibility. There's that meme of women always avoiding responsibility, but third worldists are kind of like this. They're kind of feminine in this regard, right?
Yes, I think this vision, this third worldist vision, it sees its own problems as its own condition as something that needs solutions that someone has to impose. Someone
Yeah.
else. It's always someone outside of that. And meanwhile, in countries with this different ethic, they understand that it comes from them, not to them.
Quick intervention here. That makes me remember of a concept. I'm not sure if someone else has came up with this, but I like to talk about inverse exceptionalism. Because we talk about, oh, there's the American exceptionalism, that it's this people, this nation, uh, with these particular features that made them so powerful, made them then expand and conquer the West and so on, and be the top power in the world and so on. But in the third worldist mentality, we kind of make this inverse American exceptionalism, right? It's almost like America and maybe Israel are the only two nations in the world who have some agency. They are able to take decisions and to change stuff. And anything else that changes in the rest of the world is because it's a reaction to those interventions, right? That people are so automatic. Anything happens, any kind of instability happens anywhere in the world, there are those people who are so quick to say they make no research at all. They're so quick to say, "Oh, that's CIA. Oh, that's Mossad." I'm not saying that don't happen at all, but you understand, it's so quick they don't think about it. There's this presupposition that change can only be enacted by those two powers or just America. You see, this it's almost it is self humiliation. You see around people or other peoples in the world as passive. If it was not for the American intervention, things would remain stale and the same forever. And that's not a good thing, but people tend to see this as a good thing.
The way that I see it, it is probably based uh, on the reason that third-worldism is in essence a moral statement, because in a lot of cases, in most cases, it is a moral statement. We are the third world is usually characterized as a blameless victim, as people who are just minding their own business, probably doing life a little slower, trying to avoid competition, trying to create cooperation, and all the good stuff of mankind, trying to, live in arts or leisure or whatever. Then came the evil industrialists, northern imperialists, trying to impose their Eurocentric worldview and etc. And this translates very well to how people react to US foreign policy, because every nation in international politics is self-centered. But because the US occupies the hegemonic position, because it is the top dog, it acquires a special moral character under third worldism. It's it's kind of an inversion, a very kind of Marxist inversion, that because this country is economically successful, militarily successful, and successful in many other ways, in other words, a true hegemon, there has to be some shady stuff, some shady moral stuff. Maybe they are under some corrupting influence that is making them be imperialistic. It can't be that they are self-centered but also successful. So probably it goes. It is a helping factor in creating a the so-called. We talk about omnipotent Jewish syndrome. We could also talk about omnipotent CIA syndrome, and that's a phenomena which I think it is associated with trying to moralize geopolitics.
True. I recently have seen a comment on X. I forgot the guy who said it, but it was really spot on that Latin Americans specifically have such a noble savage view of themselves, right? I think you guys can see this as well. How much we quote unquote see ourselves as those heartwarming people, and I mean, there's so much hospitality and warmth and so on. We're so nice and like everybody. And when you look at the reality, many times that's only serves as a veneer to a much more resentful personality. There's passive, in my opinion, passive aggressiveness is the one of the most characteristic traits of Latin America, especially of Brazil. And I see this a lot. Maybe I'm too biased. Maybe I'm a bit paranoid, but I see how much we cannot be directly aggressive because we know we can't win the fight. So it has to be done in this slimy way. We have to show how nice we are in a way that always diminishes the others. And I mean, I see this a lot. And I remember also Jared Clark commenting how you talked about a moral view of the international relations. I remember he commenting how multipolarity, which is a term we see a lot coming from Duginists and Eurasianists and so on, which are very much a part of this third worldist mentality. They talk too much about multipolarity, this dream of a world of spheres of influence, in the independent spheres of influence, and that ultimately is an egalitarian view of international politics, right? You're taking the idea of egalitarianism in a society and you're moving this to the relation between countries, which is fundamentally leftist, right? The right wing view of the world. If you see the necessity of hierarchy in a society, you would end up seeing the necessity of hierarchy in the relationship between countries, between nations. It's just natural that you end up in a world that's fully connected. You would end up having a global hegemon. The only reason you didn't have this in the past is because people were too far away, quote unquote, or they were farther away. There's no communication, so you could have an hegemonic Inca Empire and an hegemonic Roman Empire and an hegemonic Chinese Empire. But nowadays, the tendency is to have this global hegemon, and that's just natural. It's not something that needs to be artificially created. When you make this demand for the multipolar world order, what you're asking for in the end is this egalitarian type of relationship between nations. And as we know, in communism, in egalitarian societies, in the end, you need a hidden or not so hidden power to keep everybody equal, right? So in the end, maybe the UN is the wet dream of the Eurasianists, as much as they don't want it, but they want an armed UN imposing equal ground, equal footing to all countries, all nations in the world.
I think you got it bullseye. I'll just say that. I was gonna talk about Dugin at some point, precisely because of that, of multipolarity.
We can't forget this crazy weirdo, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also because we talk a lot about Olavo here. and it's hard not to remember their debate. I
True.
should probably read it again, but anyway, the thing is that imperialism is normal. It's absolutely normal, precisely because of what you said. It's like a pyramid of power. It's when I talked about the revolutionary mentality, that's what I meant. They wanted to make the hierarchies disappear. They wanted everyone to be on the same level, and when clearly that's not the case. There are cultures that are more productive, or better, if you want to be more blunt about it, there than others. So, well, because of that, you can live under two kinds of empires, one that is good or one that is bad. Well, not two kinds, but you get the idea. Um, Empires are inevitable, and I think people should appreciate more when the empire that is reigning at the moment is better than what it could be. I have a friend who once said, with regards to this topic, once, and by the way, once I mean like last week or something, that when the walls of Rome were torn down, what followed was not better even for a moment. So, yes, the empire fell, but what came afterwards was hell. How much of the empire is actually protecting you? There's a movie called A Few Good Men, and the most famous scene of the movie is a speech by Jack Nicholson's character. Basically, he did something very immoral to keep the Marines working, and he's a very um, tough guy, but he believes he did what was right. He ended up killing a Marine in order to, keep things going on. And he says that people are people who weep for these tragedies are the ones who have the luxury of being able to weep about these tragedies, because deep down they know they need these people to protect their freedoms. They can only have these feelings because someone else is giving them the is providing them with the freedoms for that. So he says that, quote, I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it, unquote. So, yeah, that's the point of view that I think these people do not understand. By trying to be the moral revolutionaries, they end up mm, messing up big time with structures that they do not understand, and they do not know how bad will get once they are messed with.
You kind of reminded me of a cool point I have pointed out in the past, in which I can see third world mentality being classified as trying to be more American than America. Because if we think about it, America is kind of the reluctant empire. Because the British were more less apologetic about it. Certainly the Portuguese and Spanish were very low apologetic about it, but the Americans have always been very apologetic about their empire. They have been for the most part reluctant, and that is something that Nick Land kind of hints at when he says that the empire was kind of accidental to Anglo countries because they and Dutch countries of also because the Dutch were the first actual capitalist empire, and the empire was kind of accidental in that way, in which liberalism and Protestantism created this dynamic in which they became so very efficient in capital economics that they gradually outproduced and outcompeted the world. And you see this a lot in American history, in that they were very reluctant to, expand, to create colonies, and to, actually do imperialism. By the time they went out to do it, like the so-called and so much feared Monroe Doctrine, was actually an anti-colonialist stance to try to kick the Europeans out of the continent. It was mostly a subtle declaration to war on Britain, France, and Spain than an actual expansionist or imperialist project. And Americans have been isolationists in the First World War and the Second World War before they, got subverted into joining the wars. And they have also been very critical about their own foreign involvements, like in Vietnam, and especially about other European colonial countries. The main driver for the anti-colonial crusade was not Europe, and in a lot of sense wasn't even the communists. It was America who wanted these countries away from European hands and into the so-called free world. And what Beppe said about multipolars wanting the UN, it is much to this vein that the UN is kind of this ultimate promise of American universal liberalism, which hasn't come to pass because it is utterly insane. So this new dispensation, which is dreamed about of multipolarity, in a way is trying to outrun the Americanism that America tried to promote, but it's I don't know, its inherent reactionary elements is trying to prevent what it could be.
Yeah, we have seen a clear case of Eurasianists or other kind of third worldists. We're acting so tough when it comes to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, saying, "Oh, this is a word of dog eats dog. Who has the power gets to impose its will and so on." The same people claiming for this international law when it came to the American invasion of Venezuela. So you can see that deep down they they believe this as well. They have this Americanized side to the point that in the end they almost want the same ideology.
Yeah, but that's where the mask drops because um, I'm sure even Dugin himself knows that what he actually wants is just for a stronger Russia. He doesn't really believe in multipolarity. It's just a fancy justification for what he really wants.
Yeah,
You just see at the Ukraine war. I mean, these people do not believe in multipolarity when it comes to the Ukrainians.
yeah, but they'll say that Ukraine is part of their sphere of influence. The only reason Ukrainians don't see themselves as equal to Russians is because of this Western gay woke influence, right?
Yeah, so the Ukrainian people don't have a say in defining themselves. So their pole does not exist. That's what I mean. Multipolarity, okay, but the Ukrainian pole, nah, not in this case.
True. And in the end, it's a sour grapes mentality, right? I think that's the proper term. There's that children's story about the fox trying to reach the grapes in the tree. I think that's that. And when she realizes, the fox realizes he can't get the grapes, she starts mocking this. Oh, those grapes may be sour. They're not worth it, and so on. Most of the things I have written down here. Uh, I was trying to track down the origins of this mentality, but most of it sounds a lot like post-rationalization. When you think about you talked about imperialism. One of the comments I have seen already is because one thing is imperialism, which is different from empire. Empire can be good, but imperialism is bad. And you make those geographical justifications because imperialism is like is a thalassocracy, right? You don't have this continuous piece of land. You're expanding your influence by sea, regions that which are not connected. So for some reason this is bad because US is like Carthage in the Punic Wars and Russia is Rome, and then you make those completely freestyle analogies in order to justify what you're saying and proving that the same stuff is actually different. That has some more scientific contours when you talk about geopolitics. Nowadays, we hear a lot about geopolitics. To be to be honest, during a certain time, I bought into it. I thought that geopolitics was just international relations, so I was following people talking about it and so on. But with time, I started seeing, oh, geopolitics is just this mimetic marker for third worldist, right? It's just this refreshed version of Heartland Fury. I'm not super knowledgeable about Heartland Fury, but I think there's this idea that when you look at Eurasia, uh, you look at Eurasia in the Atlantic, there was this idea that who gets to dominate the heartland, a huge chunk of Eurasia, when you could find most of the resources, would be able to dominate the entire world. I believe that stems a bit from the Great Game, that competition between Russia and Great Britain for Central Asia, but that's just a guess. When you look nowadays, what you see from those geopolitics specialists is this kind of geographical determinism, which tries to uh, give a scientific veneer to this idea that geography will determine everything, and because you are from the heartland, you're somehow is in a more justified position to take over the world, and people resorting to the sea and so on. They are corrupting it. They are making imperialism. They're promoting this thalassocracy, which is fundamentally capitalist, which is evil, and is submitting the entire world to the commercial forces and so on. And as I said, they make those historic ties to Carthage, which is, oh, but Carthage, they sacrificed children there. Therefore, in the US is the same. They are sacrificing children to Moloch. For Russia has to save us because Russia is Rome. Don't you get it? And there's all those shifts in geography. I've seen Dugin talk about, oh, there's Hyperborea and Gondwana, but for some reason there's Hyperborea becomes the east and Gondwana becomes the west, and then it rotates again 90 degrees to the point that now the global south is Hyperborea and the global north, the first fourth, is Gondwana. And it makes no sense at all, but the analogy attracts people for some reason. I went in a crazy rant here.
Analogy is my passion.
Yeah. Also, there's other kinds of there's other phenomenon I see, which is we talked about the Protestant work ethic, right? And by contrast, there's always this instrumentalization of Catholic and Orthodox denominations as this uh, resistance force, right? We see a lot, even in the US, but here as well, and in the Eastern Europe, especially Serbia. For some reason, Serbia has this pretty strong this idea that the more traditional forms of Christianity, they are those they are seen as those resistance forces against the Protestant liberalism and so on. And I mean, you can make this argument to some extent, but the problem I see is that their worldview, although on the surface it sounds traditional, sounds religious, and so on, it's fundamentally atheist because they see those religions as expression of culture, is an ethnic manifestation, is an ethno-cultural manifestation. So Catholicism is for a certain part of Europe and Latin America. Orthodoxy is for Eastern Europe and Russia and the Russian domains, and Protestantism is for those Anglo-American Dutch realm, which is responsible for everything bad in the world. So you're basically tying religion to a certain location, and maybe you say something about certain Oriental religions as well. So it's a fundamentally atheist view of the world, a fundamentally atheist view of religion, when you take them only as cultural manifestations. But they sell themselves as this traditional view, as this religious view, but deep down they're just instrumentalizing it as a political weapon, right? They're weaponizing it.
Yeah, I think the this I don't know much about this specifically, but this is interesting to me because The Orthodox churches, they don't see themselves as like one big Orthodox thing. It's like the local, I don't know, Serbian Orthodox, then the local Romanian Orthodox Church, or the, you know, it really it has a nationalistic element to it, isn't it right?
Yeah, it's more fragmented, but they will sweep this under the rug, or maybe they will just say that the kinds of the Orthodox churches that don't align with the Moscow Patriarchate, for instance, they are just corrupt. When you look at 2018, you have this schism between the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and Ukrainian Church, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, or something like it. When one of them became under the Moscow Patriarchate, and the other one got autocephaly, and you can see this. Oh, this shows how the West is trying to subvert the true Orthodox religion, and which is not true at all. You look at the Russian clergy. Where did they come from? You had the Soviet Union, it fell, and somehow you have this whole clergy for the Russian Orthodox Church. Most of them are political agents, unless you buy into the narrative that Soviet Union never repressed religion. That's a Western lie, and so on. So they were always there. But there's even an institution named the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia that gets complicated, which condemns the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia, saying they are just a costume for a communist mentality.
Yes, I was gonna get into something kind of like that because at the end of the day, it also becomes that the most their own little imperialism, you know,
Yeah,
and Russia's at the top of it. It's not in their view of this their worldism is not anti-imperialist when you think about it. And when you were talking, I also thought in a way, the different Protestant denominations they kind of express different cultures too. I mean, you can't imagine Lutherans coming from I don't know Scotland or something, Scotland or England or something. It's really not the same culture at all. They have to be from Central Europe or something.
yeah. You can say that many Christian denominations have this ethnic aspect for sure.
Yes, so there is a parallel between the Protestant denominations and these Orthodox specific nation churches. I don't know how they're called, national churches maybe. Um, but I think I might be going way beyond my my knowledge on talking about this. However, there is something interesting. When I was reading the White Pill by Michael Mellis, something that came to mind was there were two big moments when the Eastern Bloc started to fall. You know, the Communist Bloc and the no USSR, etc. The first one was when Pope John Paul II went to Poland to have a mass that was supposed to have to have happened years prior due to the millennia celebration of the millennia coming to of Catholicism coming to Poland. Even though it was the 70s, even though the communists warned Pope John Paul II not to do it, he still did it, and it was the first, evidence that maybe the communist governments weren't as powerful as people thought. And the other one was a Protestant pastor in Romania in 1989. He was the one who started it all in Romania that ended up, shooting the Ceausescus and things like that. The single only denomination that I did not see represented at all were the Orthodox. And I think that the Orthodox Church either sees itself, at least the Russian Orthodox Church, either sees itself as a political thing or the government uses the Orthodox Church to their political means, uh, because I don't see why it would not happen. Even in Romania, there is a local Orthodox Church, yes, but do they submit to the Russian Church? I really don't know, because Protestantism isn't that big in Romania, and
I mean,
yet it was a pastor who you know kind of started it all.
hot take here. We know that the Catholic Church is Catholic, right? It's in the common name. It's the Roman Catholic Church, but Catholic means universal, right? They have these universal aspirations. But traditionally speaking, they have the aspiration. Oh, we intend to expand this to the entire world, the entire universe, even to aliens if they appear, and so on. One thing that a lot of people do not know is that the Greek Orthodox Church, it has Catholic in the official name as well. I mean, during a lot of time, there's a lot of competition to what uh, came to be the Orthodox and the Catholic and the Greek Orthodox and the Roman Catholic churches. But during a lot of time, they were basically the same church. There was some internal disagreements that ended in a schism. But the Greek Orthodox Church, it is Catholic in name as well. So they had this universal aspiration. What have been developed over time, I believe, with autocephaly and so on, and especially with the fall of Constantinople, that moment, 1453. I always get sad when I see 1453 in my clock. Is that they had to, I mean, reshape their mentality to some extent, because the Eastern side always embraced this. How to say it in English? Is like Caesaropapism, when the head of the church and head of state is the same guy, right? The emperor was the head of the head of the church. It's not like in the West that you had the Pope and you had different kings, and they developed this mentality of necessary having this necessity to being tied to the secular power. And when you still have the empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, Roma Booze who argue about it forever, uh, it was more or less clear. Okay, we're the church of this political entity here, even if we grant autocephaly to the Bulgars and so on, but there's still this main church here, this main Greek Orthodox church here. When the Turks take over, I think the church had to, I don't know, adapt to the times, and very quickly there's this famous saying, oh, it's better the turban than the tiara, because there's so much resentment with the West, with the Western Church, the Roman Catholic Church. They they'd rather live under the Ottoman Sultan than submit to Rome. So I believe over time they developed this mentality of accepting whoever is in power, right? Because it gives them an opportunity to give a middle finger to the West, basically. So maybe that's the reason why those societal changes will never come from Orthodox churches, because they have developed this mindset. Okay, accept the power there is better than asking for Western help. Is better than being changed from the West, basically, because they are enemies. Because 1204, there's that joke that for Orthobros, 1204, not the final end of Constantinople, but the sack by the Fourth Crusade, is almost like the Orthodox version of the Holocaust, right? Do not forget about my 6 billion horses and all the relics that have been sacked. I mean, I think that's sad. To me, it's one of the saddest points in history. I I I if I could choose a moment never have happened, it would be the sack of Constantinople in 1204. But it becomes this. They keep going back to this. Any criticism to the Eastern churches, to the Eastern world, it always comes back to this. Oh, but do not forget the sack. Do not forget what you have done to us, and all that stuff. So I believe that political change will not come from the Orthodox churches, because they have consolidated this mentality to support whoever is in power in our Eastern shitholes or so on, because that's preferable to accepting any Western influence.
That's very interesting for many different reasons. But what I was thinking about was how this associating the West with, taking action to change things is something that we could have talked about in the episode about what is the West. Because when I think about it, the Eastern, yes?
I was just going to. I say West here in a broader sense. I'm not considering the meaning we used in that episode
No, no,
because
no. Yeah, I'm aware. But I'm saying that when I think about Eastern ideologies, philosophies, religions, and things like that, even when it comes to, for example, Eastern Asia, like Japan, like China, and things like that. For example, the Tao always talks about non-action. It's kind of like the virtuosity is in not doing things. They have more focus on what you should not do rather than in what you should do. So maybe that even translates a little bit to Eastern Europe, for Russia, for the and well, Eastern Europe's Christianity is mostly, Orthodox. So the this inaction, maybe it's even something, I don't want to say geographic, but from that, from culture, from that part of the world.
yeah, I'd say it's deeply ingrained.
You guys have talked brilliantly about Eastern Orthodox and other religions, but I wanted to bring the focus more to our reality here in Brazil, especially Catholicism and its relation to third-worldism, which I think it is deeply linked. As you guys have pointed out, that third-worldism in its Eurasian and Russian perspective is deeply tied to orthodoxy. The kind of Hispanic third-worldism is also, or Latin American third-worldism is also very heavily associated with Catholicism. But the thing that we have to keep in mind with these defenses or apologies of either orthodoxy or Catholicism or even Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever is that they are not taken by themselves. They are taken in relation to the hegemonic power. So Catholicism in a third world framework is only relevant as a contrapoint to dominant Anglo-Saxon Protestantism. In and that to me is probably one of the main gripes I have with not Protestant, with third worldism, which I think you guys share, and it's that, as we have mentioned, the idea that imperialism is natural, rejecting that and kind of forcing this equality is basically forgetting what drives people to empires. We cannot forget how Catholicism was the main driver for Portugal and Spain to create their empires. It what led them abroad. It is what allowed Portugal to control the Indian Ocean, to control Africa, and Spain to conquer the Americas in the name of spreading the faith. And of course, its adventures which brought loot and gold and etc. So this imperialism done by Catholic countries is viewed in a good light, even though there isn't very much of a difference. I mean, there is difference. There is, of course, fundamental difference between Portuguese and Spanish colonialism to American, English, Dutch colonialism. Of course, they are driven by different religions, but when they are put in the third world framework, they they get this inherent evilness of Protestantism and inherent good of Catholicism, not because of the merits of Catholicism, not because of the merits of Spain or of Portugal or etc. It is something very forced. America evil because it is strong. Protestantism evil because America is Protestant, and the whole range of third world countries with open sewages and drug cartels and favelas and whatnot is good because America is bad, because Protestantism is bad, and because Catholic and because third world Brazil is Catholic, then Catholicism is good. It is the distant position. It is the future of multipolarity and etc. So you see religion being instrumentalized not as the main driver of a civilization, but as this kind of subterfuge, this slimy defense of why we are superior and why your religion is evil because you're evil and you should not exist and whatnot.
I appreciate you taking us back to Latin America reality, because there are two things I forgot to combine. I have said them, but I forgot to combine those ideas. Yeah, Catholicism is supposed to be universal, right? It has this idea of expanding to the entire world, being accepted everywhere by everyone. And I mean, any Christian denomination has this intention, at least initially, right? You can say that some denominations, some branches developed a more local, ethnic, national aspect, but in principle, everybody has to adhere to it. What you see inside the third worldist framework is a subversion of this idea, especially in the case of Latin America. As I have mentioned, that Catholicism, in this case, becomes this cultural manifestation, becomes this trait of a certain ethno-cultural group. And it's basically, oh, it's a Latino thing, case closed. Even when you see some influencers, some Threadcaf influencers talking about, oh, America will be Catholic and so on, they're not thinking about Joe Biden. They're not thinking about a white man from New England uh, representing this American Catholicism. They're thinking about the ethnic replacement of America. I think that's pretty clear to anyone who can read between the lines, right? And there's always this passive aggressive, and as I said, they don't see religion as this. Oh, it's a gospel. Oh, we need to take this gospel. I mean, to those rednecks from the South. What's the name of the church? The Southern Baptist Church. We need to take the gospel to people in Oregon, to white people in Oregon, and so on, to Canadians. No, it's always this undertone of ethnic replacement. Oh, those guys are cooks. We're breeding more than them. We're more based. Latinos are more based. They're trad calf conquistadors and so on, and we will take over the ethnics, the religious replacement is necessarily tied to this ethnic replacement and cultural replacement and so on. So that's true. There's instrumentalization of Catholicism as this cultural and political force, which is a subversion and is ultimately atheist.
That's something I really don't like about the whole third worldism mentality, that it kind of becomes an ideology in and of itself. It kind of becomes the end in of itself. In some ways, some people treat geopolitics as their own religion, and it takes the foremost attention in their lives to the point that it reorients everything about it. Everything else is about geopolitics, and you create this paranoid kind of mentality where you equalize every other aspect of your lives in relation to the dominant geopolitical power and to these fringe groups of desperate groups trying to get their own, you can call it multipolar place in the world or whatever, and you end up just rolling over everything else. So race and culture and religion, everything is just pawns in the game of geopolitics. I think it is a very damaging and a very modern way of approaching the world. It is a kind of paranoia about power, the same way some Marxist postmoderns are paranoid about power. You could think about someone like Foucault or whatnot.
Yeah, and this in this declared intention of removing artificiality from the world, those liberal impositions, those globalist impositions, and so on, they end up creating even more artificial stuff, right? When you talk about the global south, there's this idea of creating an identity, a shared identity between all those countries, all those different realities. They are defined by defining them, all those nations, as basically non-Western. Oh, you're not. I know we have talked about Brazil in this case, which is not properly Western in the sense that we have defined in the episode. But when those people talk about it, they're basically saying, "Oh, you have nothing to do with the European reality, the European and American reality." Okay, more specifically the Anglo-American, but you have less to do with Portugal and Spain than with African countries, Angola or Iran or China or but in this case, especially in this case, they make this special pleading for Russia, right? I remember seeing some influencers, some Eurasianist influencers saying, "Oh, we have everything to do with Russians because we live in favelas and they live in this post-communist Islam, so we're the same. We're friends. We have nothing to do with those guys." I mean, the Slavic mindset is almost opposite to the Latino mindset, but they have to force this common identity, this shared identity. Oh, and you have to believe somehow that you have more to do with a Moroccan because centuries ago there's this Islamic invasion of the Iberian Peninsula. You have to identify more with a Moroccan or any kind of Muslim nation uh, of partially Arabic nation. Then you can identify with Portugal and Spain and France. You have disregard all the Latin heritage and so on, and create this artificial uh, identity which is so vague that you can basically define it as non-Western or even non-white or non-European. It's a definition via negation, which we probably have commented about it already, which is the most destructive thing ever. Because if you define yourself by this contrast, once your target vanishes, you vanish as well.
Yeah, I think you're spot on that idea, and it is pretty clear to me that this whole totalizing narrative about the third world is in a lot of ways a a very detrimental and pessimistic view about your own culture, and it's a kind of unintuitive way to think about it, because the whole propaganda aspect of how third world poses itself is uh, trying to show, oh, look how much we have to celebrate in our country. We're not behind the US at all. We are not behind Europe at all. We have this. We do things a little bit different here, and etc. But deep down, it is a realization that, these guys, whether it is through moral malice or any kind of conspiracy from their part, they're on the hegemonic position, and that's bad. That's a bad thing, because there is this, I don't know, shared understanding that each culture is to be left to their own, and we shouldn't try to mess with each other's affairs. But it is all very loosely defined, not in the sense that you can't find some systems. There are, of course, very many systems which try to justify why the Eurasian system works, why the Latin American system works, and again, we fall back to that point, which is, why do these cultures, and especially talking Anglo-American cultures, but we could go back to the time of Rome and say, do these cultures get this dynamic surge to go and impose their views on other cultures? Because we in modernity tend to think this as bad, but when we look back at, for instance, what the Spanish did in the Americas, we at least tend to think to see this as good. We Ibero Americans or Portuguese Americans or Spanish Americans, we tend to see this as good. But if you take this from the at least the black legend aspect of Protestant culture, you see, no, the Spanish are brutes and mass murderers, and the Incas and the Aztecs were the most civilization, the biggest civilization in the Americas, and etc. and etc. So you could play this all day. In a way, the black legend is the original third world mentality, because Spain was the most successful country, so we have to sneer them all the time to make it work.
Yeah, again, it's sour grapes, right? When we talk about imperialism is a problem because we don't get to do it. I mean, a quick spoiler of at least an episode I have planned in my mind. We had between Brazil and other countries in South America the Paraguayan War, right? There was the Triple Alliance: Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay against Paraguay, and you see to this day how Brazilian nationalists, quote unquote, the bad kind of nationalists, they celebrate what has been done to Paraguay. They exterminate their population. They deserved it. Don't trust what people. Don't trust the woke narratives, making them taking them as victims and so on. They deserved it. They provoked it, and all that. And say, imagine. I know that. Imagine if the roles are reversed. It's super city nowadays, but I can't escape from it. This is the kind of attitude that those same people would never accept from the U.S. I mean, look at the invasion of Venezuela. They haven't provoked a genocide there. They almost just took the guy, killed some guards, some Cuban guys, and took them to the U.S. to be judged. It was almost the cleanest thing you could do, and people cannot accept it. Oh, look, this is unacceptable. That's why we need the atom bomb and so on. And when you look at the things that Brazil has done, it's always justified. So although this outrage, all this moral outrage is sour grapes, the problem is that we don't get to do it. Deep down they know. I wish I had the power. I wish we had the power to do it. I wish we had the power to impose our will over the entire world, and we can't. So we need to make those moral statements about the capable people did. The same goes for Russia. Oh, there's 4 years they're grinding down in Ukraine. They're completely entrenched, advancing inch by inch, and that's somewhat justified. Oh, killing Ukrainians is okay because patriarch Kirill say that they're evil, they're part of global agenda and so on. But when it comes to the US doing it or even Israel doing it, it's all tyranny. And even more delusional, I've seen people commenting that the fact that the US was able to capture the Venezuelan leader and take him back to be judged is a sign that the American empire is crumbling, is falling down. They come with this, oh, every empire lasts on average 250 years. The American time is coming. So there's all this nonsense, this wishful thinking, and almost an inversion of the evidence. You see evidence of how strong they are, and you take this as a proof that it's crumbling down. It's sour grapes to the next level.
Another tomato can factory opened in Africa. The American world order is finished.
Yeah, you see the Burkina Faso guy, right? people remember people joking, oh, the Burkina Faso has made an alliance with North Korea, now the West's finished. It was almost a Europa Universalis 4 kind of alliance.
Yeah, I think we could have a strong case, as Emerald said, to classify third world mentality in a kind of revolutionary mentality. Because as you said, Beppe, once you take this totalizing narrative about geopolitics and you kind of drive this for all possible political issues, you end up being able to justify everything, basically as a revolutionary will do, because a revolutionary would say, oh, to rob a bank, yeah, you may think it is morally reprehensible, but it's for the cause, it's for the liberation of all workers in the world. So you might see this small act as petty violence, but it actually is a moral and good thing to do. So when we think about the Paraguayan War and say, oh, this we kind of genocided the entire population. This kind of seems a bit much. But no, we are justified because we are the multipolar order in South America, or Russia can invade Ukraine because it is attacking the globalist world order, and the globalist world order is bad. Therefore, Russia is justified. So you can basically justify anything, and you could watch in the next year or so, and hopefully not, China invade Taiwan and say, yeah, it's attacking Taiwan. It's a brutal destructive war, but it's attacking American ally and America led bad. Therefore, Chinese imperialism good. You can basically justify anything under this metric, and that basically what qualifies it as revolutionary. And I'm not saying Brazil was not justified in the Triple Alliance War. At the end of the day, the Paraguayans were the one putting the soldiers on the front line at gunpoint. We're just, having to shoot our way in. But the thing I'm trying to put attention here is being able to justify everything under this single framework. You could make your case by pointing to various arguments. Oh no, Ukraine and Russia are brother countries, like Putin tried to do, which I think it's an illicit effort or an attempt to try to justify their war. But if you put it on the third world framework, anything goes. You can't justify, Burkina Faso annexes France because America le bad. It is just that easy.
This kind of shows me that when I was talking about Dugin earlier, uh, it's I said that it basically his argument about multipolary the multipolar world and everything were just justifications for something else that he really wanted, which in his case is for Russia to become, a global superpower and everything. So yes, when you have this single goal in mind, you can use anything as justification for anything, because none of that is actually the truth. What you really want is something else, and this is, in the case of third worldism, is pure resentment against the quote unquote north, uh, you know, global north or something like that. It's it's just based on resentment.
Yeah, and it's ultimately anti-civilizational. There is another concept that I think I came up with, which is basically the underdog dilemma. Uh, Emerald, as you familiarized with fighting sports as well, as we have mentioned in the last episode, from time to time I see those interviews by Brazilian fighters, and there's always I always see this trend, or almost always see this trend of saying, "Oh, look, Brazilian fighters they're better, they're tougher than the American ones, for instance, because we come from below. We have these hardships in life and so on that develops us to be stronger fighters. We want it more, have more willpower, and so on, so better." And when the same guy loses, one of those guys lose, there was this there's those speeches like, "Oh, but we don't have the same conditions as the Americans because they have the better training infrastructure, they have the better uh, supplements, nutritional supplements, and so on. So it's harder for us." So at the same time that you praise yourself for fighting through hardship, but at the same time this hardship becomes your excuse when things don't work. So I and most of those fighters are going to the US to have those better conditions, to train under better conditions. So you
I
see
was about
there's,
to mention that, by the way.
yeah, you see there's this idea that I desire what those other people want, but I cannot openly admit this. So I need to frame it in a way that because I don't have it, I'm better. Right? The fact that I don't have it makes things better for me. It's an advantage for me. But deep down, I know that's not true because my attitude says otherwise.
This also shows how fragile is the Brazilian, uh, pride, the pride in being Brazilian, because it's very, it's merely a technicality. Because if you are not, many of the successful Brazilian fighters, they are not living in Brazil, right? If you are not living in Brazilian, inside of Brazilian culture, uh, you know, uh, even in the country, how much can you actually give credit? How much credit does Brazil actually deserve?
Yeah,
Is it really this, or are you just, making your own narrative?
that's true. One of the few fighters which were more sincere that I remember was Rafael dos Anjos, uh, who said that the moment when he decided to go to the US was when he went to train during Carnival and he found the gym basically empty. There was no one there. So and that's the thing that he never experienced in the US. Even if you go to train on the weekend, there will be people training there. It's a different mentality. It's not just infrastructure. It's a way to approach things. So, but many don't want to admit this. They say, "Oh, but Brazilians are stronger because things are harder." So why do you desire things to improve then? Why do you complain that things are not as good as in other places? Desire communist dictatorship. You'll be stronger than anyone. You'll be Yoel Romero. You'll be that specimen of nature, right?
Absolutely.
One thing that third world mentality has done to Brazil, we have talked about the lack of accountability, and this, coupled with the pervasive narrative of foreign sabotage, has kind of alienated Brazilians of their own destiny. It kind of goes hand in hand with our perception of corruption as well. And Brazil is a deeply pessimistic country, and I see third world mentality as a sign of that. We feel increasingly more out of power, out that our deeds, ideas, or movements are each and every day less powerful because everything we may try to do, uh, the government is too corrupt. Maybe the CIA has already devised a plan to sabotage and whatnot, and I see it as a kind of admission of failure, the adopting a third world framework, because we're not we don't have anything to show really. What we end up doing most of the time is saying, yeah, we tried, but these immoral Anglos are extorting us through interest, and we can even throw in the JQ on the question and say, yeah, these guys are ripping us off too. We try to play fair, but hey, even though we were backhanded and cheated and whatnot, hey, we still have samba, we still have carnival. Favelas are not that bad actually. Open sewers are not that bad actually. It's just a different mentality. So third world mentality kind of trains you to powerlessness and to acceptance, and it is deep down a defeatist ideology. Nothing
Yeah,
changes.
deep down, maybe in the end they will believe that the history of the Peloponnesian War has been written by the CIA, right? Because when the Athenians go to the Melos Island, there's a famous quote that the strong do what they can, then the weak suffer what they must. That's clearly CIA propaganda. Things are not like that in the real based Tradcaf Latino world. But talking more seriously, one of the problems with this pessimistic mentality is that it leads to cynicism, especially about human achievement, right? Our own achievements and the other people's achievements. Uh, one case that stuck to my mind when it was has been mentioned, I think it was Jared Clark as well. Uh, you know all those the talk around the moon landing, right? There's a lot of people who do not believe it. Uh, it was fake. It was recorded in studio and so on. And if you pay a little more attention, there's some you see some third worldist uh, way of thinking there as well, because they're always concerned about the NASA, right? The American Space Agency. Even look at flat earthers and all that. They're NASA is lying to us. This is all photoshopped by NASA. This is all recorded by NASA. Why you trust NASA and so on? And they somehow forget that there are other space space agencies in the world, right? Oh, if NASA is lying to us, what happens with Roscosmos, the Russian one? What happens with the Chinese one? What happens now with the Indian one? There's many other countries sending satellites to the world, satellites to the atmosphere, and even manned missions. So why you're not concerned with them is always NASA. NASA is lying, but for some reason Roscosmos wouldn't take the opportunity to humiliate them globally by exposing the lie of the moon landing, by exposing the lie of the Earth shape. You see, there's this focus on NASA because that's the only entity that you need to take the credit away from. That stuck to my mind. Even when it comes to the human achievement, we especially cynical about the people we deep down envy.
You mentioned before, like the person that said the story of the fox and the grapes, right?
Yeah,
Oh, it's not even that good. They were sour, you know. Oh, I don't really want that. I don't really like that.
sour grapes, cynicism, passive aggressiveness. That's that's the root of this. And I mean, I see it manifesting itself in increasingly more aggressive and even animalistic forms. I remember some years ago, a good few years ago actually, when people started talking about migration, immigration crisis in the U.S. and Europe and so on, and it was a more uh, empathetic way of talking about it. Oh, look at what's happening to Europe. Look at what's happening to the US. That's bad. Those immigrants are bad. The Muslims are not cannot fit into this culture and so on. They are taking things down. Uh, there's a more sympathetic view. But nowadays, as third worldists started gaining more and more of the narrative, you see things like, oh, they deserve it, right? Oh, the Europeans, they're just woke and weak and feeble and so on. They want it, they deserve it. It's almost like they're almost saying that they hope the immigrants destroy everything, so that the Latinos, the actual base people, will go there and fix stuff and take over, right? I remember seeing some cases of there's this Brazilian guy who is uh, who was able to neutralize a robber in Ireland or some place like this. And there's always those comments. Oh, look, the Europeans need us. They're weak. They need us, Brazilians and Latinos and so on, because we're stronger. They need us. So you see this substitution rhetoric going on as well. It's almost like it's not more the point that we're just blaming them for stuff and hostilizing them. The rhetoric's increasing to the point that people are daydreaming about taking over. It's almost, oh, Europeans don't deserve it anymore. We, which are the descendants of Rome for some reason, now Brazil is inherited Roman authority as well. We should go there and take over because we're stronger. They need us. They will thank us for defending them. We'll go there and and take over the institutions and take their women and so on because we're more based. But deep down you see this hatred. They want revenge, especially with Portugal, right? There was those cases of people going there, taking land and money, coming back to Brazil without paying, and say, "Oh, that's justified because they took our gold, like they're those with Mick, they're Roman indigenous Brazilians, right? The Tupinambas inherited Roman authority for some reason, and this guy is a descendant from them, and he's just making enacting justice.
In a way, you could say third world mentality is you, as Zizek would put it, you are just perverted guys who are horny for the apocalypse, and third worldism is just you are just sick, defeated loser cultures who are trying to see your neighbor fall so you can steal his watch and whatnot. So there is a lot of this resentment of praying and hoping for Europe of the or the US destruction so that you can gobble up these remaining piles of the European or American world order. And that is certainly the case with China, at least. I don't know much about the others, but you know, every day China is trying to play the long game, hoping the US sleeps so you can conquer, you know, Taiwan and whatnot. And this whole immigration process is very ironic. I think you Beppe can explain this better than us because there is a lot of pointing fingers at Western Europe for how open it is to migrants. Yet there is the whole Belarusian border fiasco and the whole Russian facilitating immigrants fiasco.
That's true, and you pointed something which is very true. You see how much those people are addicted to this doom porn, right? They want the collapse because the collapse is the point where they were able to enact justice on those oppressors and so on, those people who deserve to be punished. But that's for a different episode. And right, as you said as well, there's this double thing, this bifurcated tongue from certain entities tied to the third worldist propaganda, right? You see a lot of profiles, a lot of people associated with Russia saying, "Oh, look at Europe, how they're falling to immigration and so on, and the culture is fading and they're woke and so on." But at the same time, you look at Russia, they have there's the European capital of the most amount of Muslims. There's those videos of they praying in Moscow during one of those 5 prayers a day, and they are clogging the streets and so on. They take immigrants and pass them through the Belarusian frontier of Poland. Poland and Finland are constantly trying having to patrol their borders with Russia because it's one of the main ways uh, illegal immigrants try to enter those countries. But at the same time, on the surface, on the propaganda, they're saying, "Oh, look how immigration is bad." But at the same time, they are promoting all kinds of immigration externally and internally, right? Taking a lot of Muslims and so on, and sending the Russians to the meat grinder in Ukraine for some reason. And I mean, it's silly to talk about hypocrisy in 2026, but how can you describe it? How else can you describe it, right? It's a bifurcated snake tongue all the time. They're saying how bad something is, but at the same time promoting it because deep down they want the same destruction. Maybe you two probably have seen recently also people celebrating the murder of that. I'm not sure where she's from, but a white girl from somewhere in Europe went to Africa supposedly to prove that there was no problem there, and she vanished. She was probably, I don't know, sexually assaulted and murdered and so on. And people always say this, "Oh, it's a tragedy, but she kind of deserved it." There's a pleasure in saying it, right? And it's increasingly more noticeable. The mask is dropping. They're dropping the pretense. It's just a resentment. It's just revenge politics. Just out of spite politics. They celebrate this kind of stuff because it, it gives some kind of satisfaction to say that the former colonizers and oppressors and so on are so weak that they are being butchered uh, around the world.
I have not seen that, but it does remind me of something we talked about, which is, people mocking gringos when they don't know how to identify dangerous places in Brazil and, touristic cities and things like that. Like, why are you mocking someone for being normal, for not being, in a culture that accepts violence and things like that? That's not something to be uh, attacked.
Yeah. Going back to the fighter interviews, I remember one case of a guy saying, "Oh, I have raised my kids here in America, but I intend to send them during some years to Rio so they don't get dumb." So it's basically, oh, you took them. It's the underdog dilemma again and again, right? Oh, being raised in Rio is good because you become this smart kid who can uh, avoid dangerous places and so on. But actually, you want to live in America, but you to some extent maybe you resent your kids being raised in a better place and you want to send them to a worse place so that they become more virile and so on. Maybe it's well intentioned. Who knows? Uh, I mean, we have to face some hardships in life in order to develop. That's not untrue. But at the same time, it's a bit contradictory, right? It's like you can't let loose. You can't get rid of this idea that being raised in a place where crime is not ubiquitous is not normal.
Yeah, and this takes me back a little bit to the idea of revolutionary mentality, because what worries me the most in the third worldist worldview is, okay, you want to bring down, the first world or whatever, but how does that happen? Do you want to turn everything into Rio? Is that it? What are the mechanics of change? What's the process that's actually gonna take place? Uh, don't you understand that this is very possibly way worse than anything, than both the things you have in mind? Like, things can change for the worst, and that's not unlikely, actually.
Yeah. But as we have discussed in the episode about South Africa, you can't reason your way out of this, right? Resentment is a powerful force. I mean, if equalizing the entire world means that everything collapses, everything goes back to, I mean, 200 years ago, it's fine. As long as I get it my way, as long as I get to humiliate those people who dare to be more advanced, better than I. It's not logical, right?
Yes, the idea of politics of resentment really, really, really bugs me. Yeah, this is probably something for another episode, but I think Albert Camus, the Rebel, talks a lot about that. You don't know if resentment and revenge is your motivation. You don't know when to stop. It actually never stops. It's like a mark of Cain working politically. It's it gets very ugly very fast.
Yeah. What will happen to this Brazilian chud when the West collapses and he realizes he's not a Portuguese noble yet? What he's going to do? He will look for more. He'll seek more destruction until he gets it.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. What else we should talk about this? I mean, we talk a lot about third-worldism as something tied necessarily to the third world, but that's not always the case. As we mentioned, Russia, it's basically one of the breeding grounds of third worldist mentality, and they're somewhat first world. Who knows? They still have this status because of military power and so on. But a more emblematic case, in my opinion, is Ireland, right? Ireland, it's one of the places with, proportionally speaking, the biggest support for Palestine, right, for the Palestinian cause, and it has nothing to do with a direct identification between Irish people and Palestinians, right? It's just just the fact that uh, the Israeli state is seen as a British project, and the Irish hate the British, so they have to support the Palestinians. Ireland is one of the is a great case of third worldist mentality inside the first world. Right? You see, almost like all their politics, their personalities, always about, oh, let's do the opposite of of what the British want, because the British had bigger achievements to the point that they were able to conquer us and dominate us. So we have to keep living, acting based on this out of spite, uh, contrarian mentality, right?
You can pretty much sum up all of this into this: I support the current thing NPC meme, and I support the opposite of the current thing NPC meme. Uh, and it really is that breakup of rational dialogue into saying, hey, what did the British could have done better to best us, so that we can learn and not get kicked in the teeth again. It is the age old example which we pretty much always use in this podcast of Emperor Meiji in Japan. He saw China get its teeth kicked in by the British, and so, I better start building some factories if I don't want to get my teeth kicked in. He did his thing and was successful, and did not do its thing, and Japan invaded China, and that's how politics goes usually.
Yeah, you have to learn even from your enemies. I mean, we're not here downplaying, I don't know, the motivations for resentment. Some resentment is justified, but it cannot make you become dumb and idiot. Okay, let's surpass our enemies. Let's surpass the people who done this to us, but let's learn with them. When you refuse to learn with them out of spite, you just uh, destroy yourselves. One image that comes to my mind now, and it probably be the main image in the thumbnail for for this for this episode, which pretty much summarizes this aspect of third worldist mentality. There was that episode, that case of a Mexican, I mean, or Guatemalan, with native origins, indigenous origins, who made this piece of art, quote unquote, where he took this Olmec head statue. Maybe you guys know this. There are those giant stone heads in parts of southern Mexico and Guatemala, which are part of this Olmec civilization. And people don't, to this day, they don't really know how they made it, how they transported the stones to those places and so on. But regardless, took a copy of one of those stone heads and smashed the Tesla with this. So he wasted the resources of buying a Tesla just to break it with this giant stone head and pose in front of it, super proud of himself. It achieves nothing, right? It's just out of spite. Oh, look, this product of the American industrial society, this rocket man guy who is bad. Let's smash it and show it to the world just out of spite. Instead of, oh, why don't you learn how to make a car? Or nothing. You just destroy things that people you despise have made in order to make a statement. And it pretty much summarizes this aspect of the third worldist worldview. You just want this feeling of revenge. You're not taking revenge. Elon Musk is not suffering because of this. You're the one who paying the price, but you feel good about it.
It is a very entropic way of viewing the world order, in which you can't have a stabilizing force, a real pole in which everything rolls around. You have to have this, kind of a free for all, and kind of this anarchy of each guy doing his own thing, and which inevitably leads up to the worship or the ruling of the ashes. If you don't have a centralizing force which puts his feet on the table and say, no, this is where you stop, it is anarchy by definition. And we're not here, of course. It might sound like it, for because we are bashing third worldism. We're not here to defend the American world order. Certainly, I don't think anybody here thinks the American world order is without flaw, or even the best, or even desirable. what we are talking about here is a worldview that essentially sees the American world order as a uniquely evil world system as compared to total anarchy and entropy. And that I just think it is not the case.
Yeah, you need to, regardless of your personal feelings about the American world order or even your moral opinion, you have to be able to understand why things are the way they are and stop denying them. If you stop denying the most obvious reasons for things, for the ways things are now, you're preventing yourself from even changing it. You're just, harming yourself. And I will take the opportunity, as you mentioned, the trigger words for a certain community that I want to address now: centralizing force and anarchy. Uh, what inside, mainly inside the U.S., but we can see it starting here as well. How the libertarian initiatives, libertarian movements have been subverted by this third worldist mentality as well, right? Because they, on the surface, they almost want the same thing, right? Oh, libertarians don't want those global powers imposing their will because that's government and that's bad and so on. So, oh, we have a lot of goals in common with those Eurasianists and so on. And in this process, they start filtering information to the point that they end up supporting shithole dictatorships just because America bad. It's more clear on the American libertarian movement, this idea that the America is the original sinner of the world and America bad, and as long as you make it clear that America bad and everybody who are allies with America is bad, you will solve everything. The world will live in peace, and you won't need government and so on. But you see it starting in Brazil as well, because we always import that kind of thing. And here we even tend to target it more against Milei, for instance, in Argentina. Oh, Milei is allying himself to the US, so he's a globalist agent. He's tied to the Jews. So we cannot support him because of this, regardless of what he's been doing, regardless of his policies going well or not. We actually, let's only take the sources who says that he's ruining the country, because that's more convenient. In this way, you see a lot of libertarian voices, even in Brazil, adopting this third worldist mentality to the point that they're almost indistinguishable from tankies.
One place I see this a lot is with Japan hate. Because, Japan is a very strong American ally at that, but you see a lot of Japan hate, which has become immortalized in the meme, because, we are a meme driven philosophy by this point of Japones cagada. Very good meme. but it is a very real phenomena in which we as third world denizens dare to speak ill of a very civilized country such as Japan, precisely because it has American influence. It is degenerate. Somehow uh, anime is more degenerate than Brazilian funk, but I digress. But to make people think that China is a better example of functioning East Asian countries than Japan is kind of a nuisance. You can only think if you are knee deep into third worldism. I mean, Japan and China, I think Japan's a very clear case, but you can find a worse example than Japan. You look at South Korea. If you want to point out a country where capitalism has done worse and the American influence has done the most harm, you look at South Korea. You don't look at Japan. I think South Korea is worse than China, and China is worse than Japan. But somehow this order gets flipped in the middle of Japones cagada.
Yeah, because in the end, they almost resent cultural influence more than, I don't know, fact themselves, right? Because they see the Japanese influence much more than the Korean one.
It can't be overstated how much America Lebed thinking does to rot your brain.
That's true. And look, that doesn't mean you need to become this caricature of a Zionist who who love the U.S. and still believes they're the land of freedom and so on, and Israel so is is the land of God and all that stuff. But don't. I mean, the opposite will not is not good as well. It's a self-destructive mentality.
Because it blinds you, as we have talked extensively and exhaustively on this episode. It kind of makes you unable to see uh, the results and the effects and even the motivations of an action. Be even something good for you. You're going to frame it in a bad way because you are entrenched in this worldview. So, for instance, the whole fracas in Caracas, I think they're calling it now. The thing with Maduro, uh, uh, objectively, if you think about it, it's a good thing. No one is really out here shedding tears of grief because Maduro left his post. He was unapologetically a hostile force which was promoting drug routes and etc. It was the textbook definition of a corrupt socialist presidente from Latin America. But you can't frame everything in third world mentality and make it make sense. So when America takes out Maduro with little effort and to the overall gain of the whole region, even though America, yes, is acting in self-interest for their oil companies, you have to frame it in a way which, although there are good dividends, America gets their oil fine. We get rid of a crazy lunatic and someone who is promoting drug the drug trade which ruins South America. No, it's an okay exchange. I will take that deal. Would you take that deal? I will take that deal. But a lot of people seem fixed. No, if America did thing, America bad. And you don't have to, as Beppe said, go around waving US flags and putting US flags on your somehow putting a US flag on Brazil Independence Day. That's not what we are proposing at all. It's just like, hey, something, maybe sometimes things that America does can be to our interest. And every country understands this. Even China understands this. Even the Soviet Union understood this. When America was on its crazy anti-colonialist crusade, who was helping the US in the anti-colonialist crusade in Africa? It was the Soviet Union. They were working together because the anti-colonialism fueled both of their self-interest at the expense of European interests.
Yeah, the thing you have to maybe ask yourself is, at least think about, is look, one nation, a country will not become the most powerful in the world without having some virtue. You cannot achieve all the things. Prosperous nations cannot achieve all the things they have achieved just with vice and, I don't know, wrong attitudes and so on. At least I'm a believer that maybe that's a true Puritan way of looking at things, but maybe they have a point in saying that if you dedicate in a virtuous way, if you dedicate yourself in a virtuous way to the work that you do, there will be material world, not necessarily rewards, but positive consequences for this. And when you start considering this idea, maybe you have a more reasonable view of American, Europe, and Japan, and Australia, and all those countries that we learn to hate because supposedly the only reason they're better than us, they're not better than us, but they are better than us because they cheated. They cheated. we're approaching here 2 hours. I was a bit afraid that this episode would last longer because I wanted to ramble so much about so much stuff. But I figure we're mostly on time, and I think I believe it's time to wrap up. So I'm sorry if I have pushed too many ideas in a single episode. I really wanted to talk about it in a comprehensive way, but this will probably branch out in many more specific episodes in the future because we're not able to talk about everything here. But I hope that's cohesive enough, and you were able to take some ideas from it. So I'll just leave it to you two guys as well to make some final statements, final considerations, so that you can finalize this episode.
Well, I find it hard for this theme to be just done after this episode. This is something recurring because it's unavoidable. It's something that we see daily. You just have to. You don't even have to scroll X or something. You literally see it with people every day. How they see the world, how they act in the world, how they justify their actions, and it goes back even to how they work, as we mentioned before. Rafael dos Anjos, the story you mentioned, it's something that is unavoidable, and it really reflects on particularly how Brazilians see it. From the passive aggressiveness, which I don't think you're exaggerating at all, even though you're concerned or you think that might be the case. And again, the idea of glamorizing these bad aspects of Brazilian culture really worry me, because it's not as if you just go from one place to the other, like from a bad place, because the American colonizers destroyed all our greatness. You don't get from this place to the place of greatness or imagined greatness without a change, without a path. And the process in which this change happens is what everyone should be worried about, but hardly anyone is. So I don't know how to uh, reconcile the fact that people want this change, but at the same time they're not willing to do anything about it, at least individually, and our politics. I don't know how those things will relate exactly, but I worry for it. And well, I think that this is what comes to mind the most.
Yeah, if I had to put it on a few words, I would say that a rule-based order based on resentment and defeatism is not going to make any country great, especially third world countries. And the sooner we can realize that, until we try to become great ourselves by changing first most our mind and reinvigorating our collective psychology, no amount of bickering and crying about the actions of the US or whatever hegemonic power, be it China or whichever rises in the future, is not going to elevate our country. Only we can elevate our country, and perhaps that's the great looming shadow which we are trying to avoid by diverting such explanations.
I agree with you both, and let me say that maybe I gave too much the impression of this third-worldism being a recent phenomenon, an internet phenomenon, but that's true. That's deeply ingrained in the Brazilian population, at least. Some of Putin's speeches, they're almost the same as what my history teacher was telling me 20 years ago. So the only difference you see between more Duginist, third-worldist people and the modern left is this emphasis on wokeness, quote unquote. It's a term I don't like, but deep down they have the same ideas, and those ideas were already present many decades ago. And it's about time, as Hermit said, that we get this comprehensive theory or some comprehensive idea of what third-worldism is and what to do about it, how to cure it, so that we have a chance of being a better place in the future. So we have a chance of owning our future, right? Taking responsibility for it, which is hard, which is inconvenient. I understand, but denying it will not help either. So
Not how to cure it, how to trump it.
right. and I mean, in a way that doesn't mean you become a mimetic kind of America lover, right? America Israel lover, in a way it's truly grounded, which is worried about your own place, your own country, your own land, your own people, but not in a delusional way, in a way that recognizes the hardships in front of you. But okay, that's it. I wish to thank my co-hosts once again, and I wish to thank our audience for following us during this episode, especially for following my rants, my incoherent rants here, because I had so many ideas in mind for this episode. But that's it. I appreciate all the support, and I wish to see all you guys once again in the next episode. So, till next time.